we have a quarter of an hour. And what we'd really like to do is to ask you, we'd like to ask you to, as a theme, what have you found interesting or surprising? Is this of value and potential implementation value to you? And how would you use that information? So how might we work together to move this knowledge into practice in a way that service providers and service commissioners can incorporate into all of the rest of the things that you are doing? And what questions are we not addressing that you would really love the CLAHRC to address in future incarnations and funding when we go back for funding? So obviously we have lots of ideas, but we'd love to hear from those of you in the audience who can add to them. So, do we have mics? And of course, specific questions to the speakers also completely in that as well. Rian, please say who you are and what organisation you come from.
I'm Rian Simpson, a community geriatrician now working with CPFT. It's really a comment on it's the role of uniting care partnership, really, because I note at the delegate list they're not here, yet they are the ones responsible now for providing care, and I'm for over 65-year-olds within Cambridge and Peterborough. And I'm just thinking of that interface between research and putting that into practice, that they are going to be key players if CLAHRC is going to be able to do that successfully. And I can only talk from my own personal experience, having moved over to CPFT and how UCP are working. But actually, I think they need that evidence-based, that support to be able to move forward with how they're planning services, which sometimes feels like a bit of an evidence-free zone at the moment. So it was just a kind of a comment, and how is CLAHRC going to sort of address that for Cambridge and Peterborough?
Thanks very much. Is there anybody in the audience who, I know we've had the CCG represented, who'd like to sort of make a follow-up comment on that? Is there anybody who'd like to sort of either add to the question or respond in any way? No. Okay, so I think you're absolutely right. And of course, when a new service is created like this, then one would hope that a substantial proportion, like the equivalent of an NIHR grant in a way, would be allocated for all the different types of work that one might do to make sure that it was generating the evidence required to inform the way that it rolls out. I don't think that happened in that way, but they are very mindful of the need for research and embedded evaluation. And Alex Jimson, who many of you will probably know, is lead, I can't remember what the exact title is, but for quality, for provision of quality. And he's assembling a research committee, sort of an advisory committee, which includes research. And he has invited people with experience of health services research, dementia, and so on onto that. So my understanding is that there is a mechanism to try to at least begin to do what you're suggesting. Do you want to come back on it?
My point was, you presented AGIS, and they've introduced this new JET team, and AGIS no longer exists because JET is...
Yeah, as Marina was saying, yeah.
And that to me suggests, how is that happening? That's already happening, so that's the slight worry.
Okay, Tony.
Can I follow that up from the perspective of our theme too? Because I think it's probably one of the most critical issues that I hope we can discuss today is how do we move from research, obviously, into implementation. But more than that, I think it is how can we integrate research and clinical practice so that, in a sense, research becomes a natural part of clinical practice. And I think we have failed to do that. The one way that we have tried to do that in the case of our theme is to have practitioner researchers, so people who are employed within the service, and CLAHRC funds them to do research. And so in a way they are seen by their colleagues as clinicians, and usually nurses, OTs in our case, but actually they are doing research, and that is tried to bring the research clinical interface closer. the other problem that we face, and that which I think your presentation illustrates, is that this work that we're trying to do interfaces with so many different organisations which we have no control over. So how do you encourage the ambulance service or something to take up research that might have been done within a university department? And this is, I think, something that we do really need to think about and to see, should we be building something, some change within the clinical side that means that research becomes intrinsic to clinical practice in a way that perhaps it isn't at present?
I think that's it's an enduring comment, and it does feel as though this is something that we've been trying to work on for so many years. And I think perhaps a comment on something that many of us have talked about over the years, and if people in the room can think about how to help us with this message, as it were, if you agree, is something which is about research and evaluation being an embedded part of clinical across to academic settings, and having expertise which can be deployed with practitioners. So if you have a research receptive, active workforce, then the expertise can be brought in to support that work, because you still need the expertise. You still need the spectrum of expertise from practitioner familiar with research and interested and engaged, right through to the sort of expert on the thing, the pure expert, and a range of pure experts. And I think we've got that in this region, in this theme, and that integration is absolutely critical. So, yeah, there's a question or a comment at the back, and then Isabel afterwards.
Hi, Ineda Miyoshi from Cambridge. I think just following on what Tony said as well, I think it's not just bringing the clinicians to the research centres, but we researchers have to go there and be also part of a team once a week or once every fortnight. In my experience, we've been going to the memory services in Huntingdon and Peterborough, and that has made a huge difference because we researchers are going there as well. It's not just bringing the clinicians back, so it has to be some form of two-way approach to integrate for real and bring back also what we're observing as researchers. We can bring really appropriate questions back and work together with the team.
Thanks for that. Yes, absolutely valuable. So Isabel and then Marina.
Thank you. I mean, we certainly in the Enduring Disability and Disadvantage theme have been doing that and working closely with clinicians. Sorry.
Yeah, but just put it a bit closer to your mouth.
Oh, okay. Is that
Thanks,
better?
That's great.
Okay, we certainly have been working very closely with clinicians, but I don't think that there's another issue, which is a lot of, and it probably affects dementia as well, but certainly in EDD, a lot of our work is done with social care providers. They're independent until we can get participation, and that doesn't mean about any individual study, obviously, but a general agreement to participate in research as part of that tendering process, then actually it's really difficult. Social care providers will say that they just don't want to take part in research because, of course, it takes them, nor do they want their service users to take part because, of course, it takes money from them. Those support to participate, the service users need staff time. We often want to use staff time. They're working at minimum wage, stripped to the bone. So I think we do need some robust contracting procedures, and they may need to be financially incentivised.
Thanks for that. I mean, that's very important points. I think that working with the local authorities perhaps might help a bit, but to some extent that's a problem that is not going to go away in terms of the workforce and so on. Marina, you had a comment, and then this lady here.
Sorry. Thanks. It was just a comment. People are talking about working with clinicians, and I think perhaps the earlier comment about the organisation that's commissioning services, that connection with the commissioners, I used to work in PCTs. I've not been a researcher for a very long time. And the time you get to do the kind of analysis that I had the time to do, you just do not have that kind of time, and you do not have that kind of time to think things through. But so that level, not just the clinicians, but the kind of commissioning manager kind of level, the people that are making all these decisions all the time about stopping a service and a new service. So that's probably a key.
Yeah, thanks for that. Yes.
Yeah, Tracy Shalom from one of the Norfolk CCGs. I think it probably seems to me that in terms of CCGs and commissioners and even the service users, that CLAHRC needs to be obviously getting their results to them in a form that they can utilise really quickly, which fits obviously what the lady there has just said, and almost in a form of recommendations for commissioners, recommendations for service, because people haven't got the time to plough through the stuff, and they're looking for that kind of guidance from you, the experts. I think actually that CLAHRC, it's a much faster process what you're doing than, say, traditional research routes in terms of how they roll out with big grants. So actually that is attractive to commissioners because it's a bit here and now. So yeah, I think CLAHRC's, the CLAHRC stuff would be really useful. It just needs to be got out to commissioners. Yeah, I think you think about your communication mechanisms, which I know you are doing because I've had connection with Emma and that, and we're kind of thinking about that, and one of the CCGs is considering that already. So I think you are getting there. I think one of the things I would actually just say is, what's the role of public health across the patch in all of this? Because, of course, traditionally they used to look at evidence and inform service commissioning and things. And I think, again, CLAHRC's links with public health that probably needs to be firmed up and a unified force together.
Well, public health is at the heart of this CLAHRC, and so it informs. The words might not necessarily be used, but it is very much a driving force. I hope Peter would say. Yeah. So thanks, Terry. And I think that has to be the last question. So.
Hi there, I'm Terry Dickerson from the CLAHRC Patient Safety Theme. In response to Tony's question about how do we get more involvement from...
Oh, you can't hear, Terry, you can't hear you. Yeah.
How do we get more involvement from clinicians? Perhaps we ought to ask them. In response to Marina's statement really about not having time, I'll perhaps preempt that a little bit before asking them. That we have our own definition of research, which is actually very long, relatively laborious from a clinician point of view, and perhaps we need a redefinition of what research is, and take something in between what we have now in practice, which is pretty much no use of research and research evidence when providing services, or how services are constructed, and the academic point of view, which is gold standard, must be published in high-quality journals. Perhaps we need something in between, something that, to take a legal analogy, is not beyond all reasonable doubt, but on balance of probability. So the research should say, what should we do on balance of probability, not what should we do beyond all reasonable doubt.
I'm struck by, thank you, Terry, I'm struck by the fact that we've moved very swiftly into the sort of generic discussion about how the CLAHRC functions and how it might integrate. And I think that's extremely valuable, and I'm sure that's going to come up again and again through the day. If you have very specific questions about the details of the projects and so on, do look at the posters and also speak to our theme members who'll be here all day. But I think that what's really important about the CLAHRC and the fact that we are in our second phase of funding, and what you're seeing the result of here, is about relationships, the fact that we've built relationships over time, and that those relationships are stable. We try to maintain them with stability, and that allows us to continue to work in a system which is unstable. So I thank you all for your attention. I thank our speakers as well, and I hope the day goes really well, and I apologise I have to leave now.